So they're a terrific press, and we are grateful for their support this evening. I also wanted to mention a couple of other presses. Ohio University Press and Dos Madres Press are each the publisher of books by several of this evening's speakers. University presses and small presses really carry the weight of regional publishing in this country. Trade houses aren't very interested in it, but it's vital work, and it brings a lot of voices out. And so we owe them our thanks for that, for sure. I also wanted to say that one of the wonderful things about virtual events is that they let so many people across, I don't know where everybody is, all over the place can tune in. One of the hard things about it, though, is it's really hard for a little bookstore to know how many books to have on hand for something like this, where you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of people. So we have already sold out of some of this evening's books. We'll probably sell out of the others. We have more coming. We'll get them as soon as we can. If you hear anything this evening that inspires you to buy a book by one of our readers, we'd love for you to get it from us. But if not from us, please get it from another independent bookstore. There are great bookstores all up and down Appalachia. So you can, I'm sure, find one that would love your support. And I am going to hand it over to Pauletta now.
Thank you, Greg. And I will add my welcome to all of you from myself and from on behalf of the Urban Appalachian Community Coalition, which is an alliance of individuals, organizations committed to the well-being of Appalachian people, communities, and cultural expression in the greater Cincinnati area. I want to say, too, just how grateful we are to Downbound Books and to West Virginia University Press for their co-sponsorship, for making this happen, and really to all the small presses, as Greg said, who are involved in the books from which we'll be reading. Independent bookstores and small presses play really a critical role in communicating the many narratives of Appalachia and its people, really of all communities, and in all our complexity, which is our shared goal tonight. I will say also in that regard that one phrase that you're not really going to be hearing very much tonight is hillbilly elegy. As the name of our program indicates, we are alive and kicking, so we really don't think an elegy is called for in this particular circumstance. So let me just paraphrase from Anthony Harkins and Meredith McCarroll's introduction to Appalachian Reckoning, an anthology from which a number of readers will be reading tonight. The broader public's rediscovery of Appalachia that Hillbilly Elegy has engendered can also be seen as an opportunity, a chance to reclaim Appalachia and to help those unfamiliar with the region to recognize its complexities and diversities. So without this particular opportunity, I doubt there would have been 1,200 people registered for this particular webinar this evening. So I guess I really need to be thanking J.D. Vance and maybe even Ron Howard as well for their work in allowing us to bring you the many stories of Appalachian culture, which we believe is alive and well. So a few housekeeping details too before we move forward. First of all, I want to just acknowledge for those of you who might be used to Zoom meetings instead of webinars that yes, indeed, you can see us and we can't see you. And we're sorry about that because we would love to see your beautiful faces. But we do see your names scrolled along our panel here, and we know that you're here and we're glad that you're here. It's just with this many people, it isn't really possible to have a traditional Zoom meeting where we can all be visible in community with each other, but know that we feel your presence there, and we will look forward to seeing some of your questions and hopefully answering as many of them as we can. And with that regard, I'll just say that you as listeners will have access to Zoom's Q&A platform, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. And we'll be using that to help guide the discussion at the end. So we're not necessarily seeing that we're going to be answering questions intentionally as we go along, but we will see them and we will try to get to group them and to get to as many of those as we can. And Urban Appalachian Community Coalition member Jeff Dye is helping Greg and me with that. And so welcome to Jeff, and we're glad you're here helping out with that. So feel free to type in those discussion questions as you go forward. It looks like some of you maybe already have. But with that in mind, again, for those of you who are used to more traditional Zoom meetings, chat has been disabled for participants. Greg will be putting, as he said, will be putting in information as we go forward, and you'll be able to see that, but you won't be able to respond to it. And I would just encourage you to if you're interested in any of the books or any of the other information that's provided, that if you might just copy and save that to your computer so that you'll be able to take care of that later. And just a reminder that in terms of books, that holiday gift giving is coming right up. So so keep that in mind. I also want to tell you this is being recorded. Of course, you're as we said, you will not be visible, only us, but want to make sure that you know that. And then finally, as we move forward, we're going to keep all of the sort of chit chat for what I'm doing right now at a minimum. And so we aren't going to be telling you all of the wonderful things about the writers as they read. Those bios are available, and I can see that Greg has already put those up for folks to check. So what will happen is that the readers will introduce themselves and say, if anything that seems to be needed about the work they're reading, and then we'll just move on to the next person. The idea being that you're going to get a whole sort of panoply of voices and stories, and can make the connections between these stories and these voices yourself as you listen. So that's the basics. If you have, again, Q&A questions, feel free to add them in, and we will get started with a poem of mine. The Road. Where I'm from, everybody had a flower garden. And I'm not talking about landscaping, those variegated grasses poking up between the yellow daylilies that bloom more than once. Even the rusted out trailer down by the green bottoms had snowball bushes that outlived the floods. Even the bootlegger's wife grew roses up the porch pillar, still flecked with a little paint. And in the spring, her purple irises rick-racked the rutted gravel drive. Even the grannies changed out of their house dresses to thin the sprouts of zinnias, so come summer they'd bloom into moo-moos of scarlet and coral down by the road. Now driving that road that used to take me home, I think how maybe it's still true. Everybody says down here it's nothing but burnout shake and bakes and skinny girls looking for a vein. But everywhere I look, there's mallows and glads, begonias and rubber tire planters painted to match, cannies red as the powder my mother would pat high on her cheekbones when she wanted to be noticed for more than her cobblers and beans. Everywhere there's some sort of beautiful somebody worked hard at. No matter how many times they were told, nobody from here even tries.
Good evening. My name's Omope. This is Lessons from the Edge of Appalachia. 10 tiny 4-year-old steps from my house. The land between 2 shotguns gets no direct light except at noon. I run my small fingers around the edges of fire bricks, that define a shadow garden. Lifting them from the soft, moist dirt and grass, I find pill bugs, worms, and dewdrops hiding. This becomes my secret hiding place, my refuge. At 6, school bus rides along winding roads with wildflowers hugging the edges take me past pasture land where my daddy and uncles herded dairy cows in their youth. Outright Route 141 beyond the edge of town to Edmondson's farm. The day camp meeting house has a tree growing right up the middle. We laugh and pretend it's Jack's beanstalk. The creek there is filled with minnows and crawdads. My grandfather gives me lessons about birds, beads, seeds, and the union of all creation. He teaches me that everything we do creates ripples rolling out in concentric circles from the source affecting our unseen future. He introduces me to the plant people who heal us. At 9, I ponder the hill. Before dynamite blew it apart to create a shortcut between Chicago and southern beaches, the sandstone bluff defined the northern edge of town, shifting from sort of a city to the really rural county where children wait in tall wooden sheds for the bus that will carry them to school. I walk 4 so-called city blocks to mine. At 10, I achieve the same rite of passage that my daddy did. I find a snake stick longer than I am tall, peel it, and carve in my initials. One Saturday after polishing my mother's house, I am dismissed to roam from 8th Street to 10th at the foot of the hill. Climbing zigzag the slope behind the armory and orphanage is relatively easy. I know the trail. I've gone up it with others older than myself. This time, I travel alone. A brown penny sack holds a boiled egg and PB&J sandwich for energy. The canvas-covered metal canteen slung across my chest is filled with icy water, enough to carry me up and back. In summer heat, I enjoy the cold radiating on my hip and learn to swish the liquid against the edge of my throat, careful not to drink too much so I can remain decent in public. I do not perspire like the delicate daughter feminine. Climbing strenuously, I sweat like a working man. Up I go, over the tunnel on Route 93, an old underground track and weight of Vesuvius furnace that clad old Ironsides in the Civil War. Pedro, the home of musician Bobby Bear, and the runaway rendezvous called Black Fork. I climb all the way to the flat rock where some anonymous somebody has carved the initials JR. Feeling satisfied and accomplished, I sit with feet dangling and gaze over my end of town, past the edges of the Ohio River into Kentucky. Watching barges ply the greasy ribbon of water, I enjoy my success and think about how far my people have come and contemplate how far I will go. Filled with possibilities, I come down expertly dodging bushes, branches, and briars. With home in sight, I drink until thirst is quenched. I hear my inner self tell me that I have passed the test. I have conquered the hill all by myself. I do not know then that I am one of the last to do so.
Hello, everyone. My name's Carrie Gunter Seymour. I'm a 9th generation Appalachian. I'm very proud of that. And the women in my family who came before me were wily and strong-willed. And this poem is titled Perfect Pitch. I rode middle school bound in the back seat of my aunt's station wagon, listening to her and Mama sing Jolene, trading verses, harmonizing on the chorus. I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. A few years later, it was 925. They were fired up, and it was Dolly's doing. This was rural Ohio, the bottom lip of northern Appalachia, right shy of Perry Como country. The women in the family worked the TS trim factory, spitting out Honda car parts, Started out on the assembly line, worked their way up to paint, then detailing, then welding. The physical labor made their bodies strong, their future bright, and like Dolly, they weren't taking any shit. They learned early on about strikes and picket lines, how important it was to organize and vote. Brave women in the workforce, determined to see their daughters inside college classrooms, the hell out of Factory Row. I didn't know then I was being raised by a feminist taking back her power. Like Dolly, my mama never would use that word, no matter how much she embodied it. She was proud to hang up her welder's helmet end of shift, pick up her paycheck, sing in the front seat of a station wagon with women she loved.
Hi all, I'm Bonnie Proudfoot. I'm delighted to read a section of a chapter from my novel In Stories Goshen Road, set in North Central West Virginia. This is a section from the title chapter, and it spans the years 1971 to 1975. And it's spoken by Desi Price, one of the central characters. She's sort of speaking to the reader, but she's thinking that she's talking to her mother also. And what you need to know is she's talking about her boyfriend, soon to be husband, Lux, and he was injured in a logging accident. And you'll hear why. Here's what I mean when I talk about how it was for me and Lux. It was maybe a couple of months after his stitches came out, one of those steamy summer afternoons. His Jeep pulled up to the house. "Let's go for a ride," he said. "We can cool off from this heat. You might want a towel." He parked at a pull-off where the kids like to swim. He had something else in mind, led the way along a footpath through the woods to a cool, shaded break in the trees beside a small waterfall. Just us on a rocky ledge, looking down onto a flowing rush of water that had carved out a deep, wide pool, a private swimming spot. Lux said, "Okay, you're going to see something that ain't going to be pretty." He stripped off his shirt, then he stripped off his eye patch. I did not know where to look first. His face, chin, throat, and long arms were tanned, dark, ruddy brown, but his slim, lean chest was as white as a pillowcase, speckled with a few black hairs. That did look funny. But his left eye, stitches had closed into scars around his eyelid, and it was sewed halfway shut. Lines of red shot toward his temple, as if some great wolf had clawed his face. "It'll do," I answered, thinking that it might not be pretty, but it was real, and real was better than pretty. "Okay," he said, "you ready?" He turned his back, scrambled from branch to branch up a nearby pine tree, reached for a braided rope hanging from a branch about 20 feet above us, and worked his way down the rope, arm over arm, until he stood beside me, a foot or two away from the rushing waterfall. He stripped off his pants, stood in his boxers, said, "Catch the rope when I swing it back to you. Do what I do." I watched his arms grip the rope above a large knot at the base, saw his legs skip backward a couple of steps, then he launched over the cliff. He swung his body way out, released the rope, hit the water with a splash, sunk clear under, then bobbed back up to the surface with a big old grin. On its own, the rope returned exactly where I was standing. I reached and caught it. I looked at the water below. Then it was up to me, in my shorts and t-shirt. I looked down at Lux, paddling backward, making room for me to land in the deep spot. I'd never before clenched anything as tight as that rope. I hung on as high as I could, my arms trembling with the grip. I stepped backward, then ran forward, pushing out over the ledge, gripping tighter. I held on until my body was all the way out over the water and starting to swing back. That's when I knew I better let go. I opened my hands. It was just me, out over flat rocks on the bank of the stream, and if I did not get it right, I'd know soon enough. Those rocks looked closer than I expected. My legs stretched out below, The rope swung loose above. I forced my legs to aim for the deep spot. The water was warm at first, then cold, cold and really deep. My toes hit the sandy bottom and pushed off. My head rose up out of the water. I took a breath, opened my eyes, and I saw Lux paddling over. "Ain't that something?" he said with a broad smile. It was everything. It was all I ever needed. I never wanted to hear that girls did not do those things. I never wanted to sit on the sidelines and watch. How do you know when to let go of the rope? If you swing out too far, you hit the rocks and you could break bones. If you let go too soon, you hit muddy spots on the bank and you have to wash the muck off your legs, climb back up to that ledge and do it right this time. Or you can grab the rope, swing out with all your strength, and when that thick piece of rope arcs just enough, drop into the deep, and there you go. I know that I have been lucky sometimes, unlucky other times, and the good Lord might have something to do with that, although his lessons are not always clear. Don't tell me you love me so much you do not want me to jump. Show me what to do and give me the rope.
Hello. Hey Siri, where's home?
Which home?
I'm Sherry Cook Stanforth. Siri sounds depressed today. So you reach out to hold her in the palm of your hand while driving down south, blast hold exits flying by so fast, you worry that if she doesn't provide some true directional sense inside the twisting dark hollows, you'll miss your chance to get off. So you holler, "Siri, what the hell is on your mind? Why won't you connect with me?" But still, she just spools around, her voice warbling low like she's doped herself on beans or twanged heroin. Stupid, foolish girl trying to take the edge off, as if she could erase a lifetime of lows. You advise her to get her head out of her ass before she blows it, to turn back to moonshine's clean burn, to hunt down her personal Jesus, to cut the crap and raise her own self up before the road runs out. "Maybe it's not too late," you scream. "Hurry or you're gonna miss the mark." Still, she stubs up, plays possum dead with you. And so, inside a dark little elegy, you mourn her clean away to the coal black heart of some jobless, urban sprawled rat race, or straight down a slick inside mine trap where very few get out alive. You remind her that even with her troubles, she still had what you needed, what we all needed. She owed so much more than the ineptitude and sloth of her hillbilly blind existence. But Siri don't give a crap about who's racing past strip mall patches and her mountain gash ups and burnt out trailer holler raids and pulverized coal power plants. Since you can't find your place without using a few of her parts as your map, she remains dead as Blue Ridge granite to you. When you ask inside this tangled mess, "Are you just sick?" she responds with diddly squat, allowing more precious time to tick, tick, tick. Piece of junk bitch knows that you're a long way from home with no clue about where you're going. So you keep claiming that you need her. Then you drill on her again for being so hatefully slow, so contrary and screwed up when clearly you're out of place and can't move on without her. She really should tell you where to go.
Hello, I'm Michael Henson, and I'm going to read a snippet from a collection called Maggie Boylan. And in this passage, Maggie is a woman addicted to opiates who's trying to hang on to her sobriety across from a place called Hillhead Hill. One after another, day and night, the cars came down Maggie's road from the north and up her road from the south. They worked through the turn, shook the bridge floor, scratched their way up the hill, and minutes later rolled back down. Sometimes a bright new SUV scrambled up the hill and an old beater rolled back down, and Maggie would know that someone had gotten the bad end of a deal and their car would end up in the row of cars parked behind the house. And one day she thought she knew the SUV that went up the hill, and she thought she saw her judge driving the beater that came back down. This ain't right, she thought. But she said nothing at the grill and nothing on her on the phone to her old man. And the boys up on Pillhead Hill continued night and day. Sometimes when the wind was right, Maggie heard snatches of music way up into the night, or high-pitched women's laughter, or the gunning of a motorcycle that set the dogs to barking all up and down the road. As the cars came from north and south, each one bore a bank account, a week's pay, or $50 from selling off the piano someone's grandmother left them. They carried the college tuition, the Christmas toys for the kids, the house payment, the support payment, the car payment that was overdue. They carried the egg money or tobacco money or money earning, giving blowjobs to truckers. Entire houses went up that hill, along with farms and small businesses, reputations and self-respect. Years went uphill, bundled like cordwood, stacked for sale, ready to burn. It's a terrible thing that happens up there on that hill, Maggie thought, but she longed for the terrible thing. Each frailed and fouled nerve was alert to the chance. Each addled neuron ached to be filled with that ecstasy and disaster. She only wanted a reason.
Hello again, everybody. For generations, the men in my family have volunteered to serve our country. In fact, historically, a disproportionate number of Appalachians have served compared to the rest of the country. We love our families, this land, and we believe profoundly in freedom for all Americans. This poem is titled Serving. Remember that time your dog died? And I didn't tell you for months because you had deployed and George Bush was shouting, "Bring it on," and we were all thinking that Korea was fixing to blow. But when I emailed to say we were headed for West Virginia, you fired back, "Mom, where's Annie?" And I had to say she was hit by a car. I sent brownies loaded with black walnuts from the old home place. Well, when you called me from Iraq asking me to talk to people about donating shoes, and I told you it was hopeless because of the tsunami, everyone was already donating. And you said, hell with that. And your unit threw in their paychecks and bought all those families just outside Fallujah new shoes off the internet. I made 200 popcorn balls wrapped in wax paper. Or that February you came home for R&R so sad and sick. I baked your favorite, meatloaf. And you said you couldn't possibly, but I gave you dough eyes so you ate and threw up all night into the next day saying over and over, "Sweet Jesus, please make it stop." And I knew you weren't talking about the meatloaf. Or the day after Sergeant Crabtree went to Vegas and blew his head off in the hotel bathroom while here at home your best friend got arrested for selling narcotics. And you said neither one of them needed to, maybe wouldn't have if you'd been there. So I shipped molasses cookies thick with Crisco frosting all the way to Kandahar. Or the afternoon your farm boy fingers tried to clamp the artery on that precious baby girl near the valley of Arghandab while her father screamed for Allah, and blood soaked your uniform when you hugged her to you as she passed. I drenched that fruitcake in brandy for 3 days. But mostly, it was the night your daughter was born And we locked eyes across the birthing room. And I thought to myself, skillet fried chicken with candied sweet potatoes, fried okra, lima beans with bacon, cornbread, and Aunt Margaret's hot fudge cake. We used the good dishes, and Grandpa Oris said the blessing. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah. We'll give him a mighty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the women, they will all turn out. And we'll all be gay then. Johnny comes marching home.
Oh, gosh, that was good.
Carrie. Wow. This poem was inspired by the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act and the invention of the Post-it note, which changed life in America. 3M just posted after 50 years. This ain't about no corporation, no glue, no tape, no mining equipment. It's about something sticky though, like blood congealing on concrete after a bullet rips open a body. But you can't stick no crime on somebody you can't find. 3M, oh yeah, we speak in code. That's how we keep our spirits alive. M, that's for men. And 3 is the magic number. Prime, at the beginning and at the end. Trinity, holy, wise men following an unnamed star. Magic, magical. Then gone. Somebody's husband, son, brother, uncle, father, ripped, yanked, snatched from life with no 3-day lapse till resurrection. Transformed. Assassination took them from men to martyrs. Their blood and sweat fueled a movement, crying throats filled with songs of sorrow, begging heaven for redemption. 3M, they continue to teach from beyond the veil. Everyone of Christ, by any means necessary. Pick up your own cross and just hold on.
And next up is Richard Haig.
I'm Richard Haig. Thank you, Pauletta. For some reason, there was no connection for a moment. Resistance, or our most worthy habits. When anywhere, even in Rome, we did as mountaineers would do. When told to stay inside the lines, we organized the strike. When instructed to take our medicine, we dug ginseng, ran naked in a blizzard. When told to straighten up and fly right, we crouched, veered left, slid on our asses down the holler. When told to listen up, we claw hammered fast and sang them down. When counseled to lighten up, we hoarded scrap iron and bullet lead. When told to get real, we remembered Jack, an old fire dragoman, and dreamed up wilder worlds. When ordered to chill, we stoked interior fires. When threatened with arrest, we clogged beyond their reach. At prayer, we profaned. In profanity, we blessed. In silence, we exhorted. In poverty, we grew rich. When silenced, we became mountain streams announcing imminent danger. When nailed down, we erupted like exploding stills. Despite brief collaring and cuffing, We slip our bonds and occupy lost days, quoting Bible and Mother Jones, and become gagging, hair-balling cats on mate one bloody pillows, mean dogs gnawing Blankenship guilty bones.
I'm Michael Maloney. My reading is from the community involvement section of an essay called The Hillbilly Miracle and the Fall. The miracle is that 4 million people could leave the mountains, many with not much formal education, like most members of my family, and not be, for the most part, a great burden on society up here. So I've chosen to read a section about my family, which is part of the miracle. You've heard traces of the fall, which is what happened when the factories shut down, and with them a lot of the other places that people work. And we had the opioid epidemic and other elements of the fall. So my generation of migrants became embedded in Ohio communities here in southwestern Ohio. And they established their own churches, bars, restaurants, and small businesses. In this world, you could spend the entire week with minimal contact with people who were not from Eastern Kentucky or Tennessee. Though they had started as outsiders in their factories and other workplaces, Appalachians eventually became the leaders of many of the labor unions in southwestern Ohio and northern Kentucky. First and second generation Appalachians also became active in other community structures. In South Lebanon, a community north of here, in the 1960s, the elementary school principal was from Breathitt County, my home county, and hired my sister Jean as a school secretary. Well, she had never been taught to type, didn't know how to do it, and she knew she would need it in that job. She bought herself a typewriter and a Gregg manual and taught herself to type. And in that job, along with the principal, she became a mentor and role model to hundreds of migrant children. She became kind of a mother to the village. Likewise, when I visited the city of Moraine, a Dayton suburb, in the 1990s, I discovered that the mayor and most of the city council members were first-generation Appalachian. These men and women were working class, and none had more than a high school education. But with the help of a professional city manager, they were doing a good job of governing the city. At the time, Moraine provided 50,000 jobs to Dayton area residents. And these mountain men and women, first generation, presided over that huge structure and did a darn good job. In Warren County, first and second generation members of my family also became active in the government of that village, leading the Community Action Agency for the whole county, the Senior Services Agency, serving on the Planning Commission of the village. The Waynesville Maloneys, 3 generations, are still active in the Democratic Party, and one grandnephew became the communications staff person for Congressman and later Governor Ted Strickland. During the 1970s, a factory in Lebanon shut down and moved south in order to find cheaper labor. My brothers, Charles and Victor, had about a 5th grade education, each of them, organized the workers and the community to buy the factory and continue to produce stove parts. Charles did the organizing, Victor did the preaching, that is the marketing, to gain community support. These 2 self-educated men were among the mentors who helped shape my politics, my life, and my career. Their children include a world leader in the Church of God in Cleveland, Tennessee, one of Lebanon's most prominent citizens, one the founder of $1 million tech company, and one the head librarian of Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati Blue Ash, and another the head of Miami University's nursing school. By 2000, there were over 180 descendants of my parents living in southwestern Ohio, and perhaps another 30 living in Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, California, and Texas. The Texas branch includes a union organizer, a well-known Appalachian filmmaker, and an artist. The members of the third generation, like their parents, are social activists. My family had its struggles. We came from pretty dire poverty. My father was a coal miner, and we also practiced subsistence agriculture. So I'm not saying that the miracle left us exempt from all elements of the fall. One sibling and I and several of the 36 second generation Maloney's did have breakups, but each remarried, and the two-parent family is still the norm. I don't know if I should brag about that or not, but certainly not all of our families were dysfunctional. An informal survey of the 180-member clan shows that only 4 are chronic alcoholics, one of whom became a certified alcoholism counselor after he got better, 2 with substance abuse issues, both recovering, 2 with mental health and substance abuse issues, and 2 deaths due to substance abuse. We have not been immune from the opioid epidemic. Only one of the 180 has been unable to maintain a functional family life. Only one of the women remained a single parent after divorce. You know, I'm not, whether that's, you know, I'm not saying that should be the norm for everybody, but I'm just telling you that I'm trying to counter the idea that all of our families are dysfunctional. So this is not a shabby record for a family that grew up dirt poor, coal mining, and subsistence agriculture background.
Hello, my name is Dale Marie Prenat, and my poem will reference the Buffalo Creek flood disaster that took place in Logan County, West Virginia in 1972. That is my home, and this poem is called Community. Trust mother's unconditional love. The 2 little ones lean on each other, close enough in age and appearance to be twins. They trust my role, oldest, after school snacks, homework, laughter, dinner, bath times. We trust each other and always trust mother, the stalwart, the provider, the survivor, the philosopher. Trust no man. Men escape responsibility. We have no need for disinterested provision. Trust no government. Overburdened bureaus, individuals pocketed in the politics of King Coal. Trust no corporation. One has labor to sell. Enter into contract with job to exchange labor for money. Trust no money. as suffocating as sludge hidden in back hill dams. Trust no dam filled with poison muck, threatening at each heavy rain. Trust no rain. Listen to the radio. Plan an escape. Fret all night. Trust no night, however seductive sleep. Come any wet dawn, a wall of hell may pour down the valley. Again, mother can't speak it, but the old folks sing, if only, and before. If only the little ones could have known it before. This long avenue of streams and valleys all knit tight together, Buffalo Creek. If only the little ones could have known the view from Balancing Rock before the slate dump began to smolder. If only the little ones could have known our own holler with water flowing so clear, the old folks bathed their babies before the flood, before 125 people woke up to die on a Saturday morning, before folks floated down the road yelling for help from their housetops, before those children went missing, lost to the black mud, before the high school became the shelter and the morgue, before the church became the Red Cross, before the National Guard trucked out trust. If only the little ones could have known before the flood, community.
I'm Richard Haig again. Am I on? Finished with the poetry of coal. Too long now, the trail of ashes from my grandfather's grave. I will not wander back along the broken ties and ballast leading to the Mingo Roadhouse where he stoked his locomotives. I will not think of coal train brakemen weeping in the chemical dark of Weirton, nor of Hambone McCarthy, who came to my grandmother's funeral almost crazy. I will not think of the deep connections with fire that scarred me even before I'd grown into pain. I will climb into light that shines on the earth before me, my body shedding its grit of anger and cinders. Even death has its ending. Let me vine like a new briar, tough over blackened land.
I'm Pauletta Hansel, and I am going to read a very short excerpt of a very long essay called My Father, J.D. Vance and Me. And for this particular reading, I'm focusing on Appalachian identity, and you are mostly getting the me part. I never felt like I was particularly good at being Appalachian. I grew up in the hills, sure, and at some point I was taught that Appalachia was the name of the mountain range that I walked out into every morning. Like my father before me, I did not as a child claim the name for myself. It's sort of a figure ground perception problem. What's out in front and what's background? If everything around you is that thing, why do you even need a name for it? Here are the names I did need: town and county, and sometimes country. Growing up a college brat, I was town. My primary experience with country was up Cutchin Creek in Leslie County, where my grandparents and most of my mother's kin lived. What I remember most about visits to Cutchin is not the people, but the place, in the sense that it knew me, this hard scrabble land, and found me soft, wanting. I could do nothing of the things it called upon me to do: walk barefoot down the holler from Granny's house, the original log cabin covered now with rough asphalt siding, to my cousin's trailer on the sharp gravel that did its best to keep the road from being nothing but ruts. I couldn't hoist myself atop the boulder taller than my tallest cousin and look out on over the next ridge. I didn't know a black snake from a copperhead, or a yellerjacket from a honeybee, or a cottontail from a jackrabbit, or even how to say my cousin Howard's name right, Howard, in a short but fluid movement from the first consonant to the last, totally bypassing the middle one. That place so wanted to spit me out that when I was 20, having graduated college and claimed my Appalachianness, I took my first solo road trip to visit Granny in my stick shift Leccar and nearly ended up in the creek, Leccar and all, unable to negotiate the 2 feet, 3-step brake clutch gas dance required to make it up the first leg of the family holler. So the irony of becoming first an Appalachian poet and later what I called a professional Appalachian as assistant director of the Urban Appalachian Council is not lost upon me. I first had some unspoken glimmer of how city life reversed the figure ground perspective that had prevented me from noticing Appalachia when I lived there, when I had moved to Cincinnati and tried to park that same Leccar to go to a downtown festival. I didn't believe in paying for parking. Really, I didn't know how. In advance, when I come back, what am I supposed to do with that machine? So I had just pulled my car into a spot and was trying to hightail it out of there when the parking lot attendant, a guy my age, called after me, "Didn't you go to Breathitt High?" I sort of recognized him, but I will say with some confidence that if either of us had seen the other on the streets of Jackson, we wouldn't have said hi. I think he might have been a football player. I was in chorus. But for that short moment in the shadow of the Central Trust Tower, we were the familiar and everything else was other. Appalachian advocacy, too, is viewed quite differently depending on whether you are a city mouse or a country mouse. In the region, the focus has mostly been advocacy on major issues: environment, health, economic stability. In Cincinnati, Appalachian advocacy has mostly been about identity, and not just for me. When I was at the Urban Appalachian Council, we spent a whole lot of time working to persuade Appalachian migrants and their descendants that being Appalachian mattered and that there were positive qualities that linked Appalachians together across class, place, and to a lesser degree race. With some exceptions, African American migrants to Cincinnati have tended to disperse throughout the racially segregated city to neighborhoods that are primarily Black. Often contempt toward Appalachian people and Appalachian neighborhoods were one and the same. When I taught at a Montessori daycare center prior to coming to UAC, the thing that both its white and Black parents could agree on is that they would not tolerate the center's proposed move to Lower Price Hill, home of the Urban Appalachian Council's main office. I believe that UAC's efforts to help urban Appalachians claim a positive identity rather than bow to the negative stereotypes did indeed make a difference to the individuals and neighborhoods we served. In my own life, continuing to claim my Appalachian identity, even after my move out of the region to a city where I could have easily passed, is inextricably linked to my voice as a writer and to my own sense of agency and civic responsibility. But if we allow the focus to be only on identity, no matter how positively framed, leaving out our history of exploitation and activism in both regional Appalachia and the places we migrated to, we are in danger of failing a whole new generation of Appalachian young people, urban and rural. That J.D. Vance, just a few dozen miles from the Urban Appalachian Council office, could grow up knowing he was Appalachian, but not know our history of activism and resilience in the face of systematic exploitation is a failure I must acknowledge my own part in. Our history is one that should be connecting us, not dividing us from other disenfranchised people.
Hey there, I'm Sherry Cook Stanforth. I grew up in a family music tradition. A lot of my memories are from going down to East Tennessee or North Georgia. My dad remembers riding up here to Cincinnati to see his mom during the summers. He'd roll into Union Terminal. This piece is called App 2. Don't ask me why I didn't grow up in a ramshackle shack with red dirt floors and a front porch washing machine, and why my teeth are so shiny and straight from Coke in a baby bottle. My white fangs gleam. They are cut from Blue Ridge granite, and they can scrape you down to bare bone, academically pruned, heteroglossic, hegemony-sensitive, specialized interdisciplinary discourse peppered with Appalachian spice. Go ahead and roll your eyes at the way I wrap my mountain identity around me like a crazy quilt forged stitch by some withered up soothsaying holler witch. My twang too educated for you? My education just doesn't jive at all with your portrait of Rocky Top. You'll always be a barefoot, pregnant hilljack daughter. Daddy don't work. Watch them verbs. Corn-fed mama got fat on Twinkies. Porch twang and hoedown and a tattered skirt princess. Well, my daddy worked hard when he was 10. His shadow stretched across lines of white pine he cut down with his great-granddaddy to feed a table full of kin. Where you been? 13 years of night school later, he took an engineering degree, all for curly-headed me, his darling barefoot baby. My cow-milking, egg-snatching, chicken-chopping mama can pluck you like a drone string on a dulcimer and tune your judgment until it snaps in two like aging catgut. I'll sing you down. I'll spin a ballad around you so tight. I once had a sweetheart, now I have none. I once had a sweetheart, and now I have none. He's gone and leave me. He's gone and leave me. He's gone and leave me to sorrow and mourn. So tight you can't breathe your next question about my PhD, my tax bracket, my way with turning words into a philosophical mind racket to beat away your death grip on my spirit. I am red dirt flecked with mica in your eye. I'm the Cherokee Mountain white girl guilt hope shooting down the Terrahala Skyway to surprise your low slag, monochromatic, stripped down to bedrock expectations of the folks. I'll teach and reach for your shadow. I'll swallow it whole, and then I'll eat up all your dirt and grow kudzu green until everything you refuse to see is covered and made gone.
And hello, my name is Dale Marie Pranat again, and this is our last poem. It's also the last poem in the Appalachian Reckoning book. Canary Dirge. American Elegy is coming. Just you wait. A bestseller will kill you off too. I'm a hillbilly. They plumb killed me. Bulldozed my bones into Valleyfield with the other dead canaries. When Exxon Oil busts up your aquifers. A red state lawyer will write a bestseller about your loose bootstraps too, and shove them down your throat. You'll be paying Nestle for your muddy tap before your book club figures out that our selenium sludge runs downstream and we are your headwaters. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale Marie, and thank everyone. And I'm going to ask the panelists to unmute so that we can clap for each other, even though we can't hear. We hope the audience is clapping as well, even though we can't hear them. But I just want to acknowledge all that we have heard today. So thank you guys. And Jeff and Greg, I know you have been taking a look at the chat as we or at the Q&A as we've gone forward, and I'm going to ask the two of you to do whatever you've decided to lead us into this next section.
Well, first, I just wanted to read a couple of the comments that people have been throwing in. Attendees were sorry that the readers were not seeing the questions that you were sending to us, but some of the things that people have said, just a few. I'm in tears, missing my people. I will be glad when this pandemic is over and we can be in person again. There was a comment that I'm ignorant of the Appalachian world, but trying to learn. This evening was an intense and helpful exposure for me. Thank you. A lot of people commented on particular lines that they really enjoyed. People heard a lot of powerful things this evening. Someone wrote, "This has all been very educational. Thank you for all your thoughtful words." Several people asking about where the recording is going to be posted. We will have it posted. It'll be on YouTube and it will be linked and possibly embedded on the Urban Appalachian Community Coalition site and at downboundbooks.com. We should have it up soon, possibly as early as tomorrow. A lot of clapping, a lot of wonderful clapping for all, amazing, thank you. We also have questions from folks, and maybe one of the first ones we could start with is something that Pauletta sort of touched on, but someone remarked that Appalachia covers a lot of area, and given that you are all writers from Ohio, the question was, do you self-identify primarily as Ohioans or Appalachians, and is there a difference for you?
So I'll start out with that, and then just, so Amoka, you can unmute yourself and answer as well. I mean, first of all, to know that we have, we specifically chose a mix of Ohio Appalachian writers. There are several of us who really identify as Kentuckians and West Virginians, really more than Ohio folks, because that's where we migrated from. And so we are here in the greater Cincinnati area as urban Appalachians. And then there are others who grew up and still live. In fact, Carrie is named herself as one, still live in the Appalachian region of Ohio. So we are a mix, and just like Appalachia is vast and not always united in such things, I would say that people on your little Hollywood squares here are not necessarily united in terms of how we claim and name our identity primarily. But Amopi, I saw you wanting to.
Yeah. No, I only think of myself as an Ohioan when it's time to get my tags and time to vote. I knew I was a hillbilly before I understood what it meant to be colored. And that's what my birth certificate says, and that's why I'm repeating it. When I went away to college is when I realized that I was a rare bird. I was too white to be black and too black to be white. And I had to figure out what I could be that would be true and honest to myself. And my mother's people come from the Smokies, and my daddy's people come from the Blue Ridge. And I'm a second generation born barely north of the Ohio River. And when you're squeezed in between Kentucky and West Virginia, and you can't get an Ohio station until they invent cable, you're going to sound like you're from West Virginia.
Excellent. Yes.
So other responses to that? Because I know we
can
are
just-
literally all over the map. Go ahead, Carrie.
I was just going to reiterate that I have 3 generations here in southeastern Ohio within a 25-mile radius. I have my people have lived here for 3 generations. However, they started out 9 generations ago in Henrico, Virginia, which is now Henrico County. They came for coal and iron jobs, and then moved into the Carolinas, and then into Tennessee, which is where my daddy was born. And so, you know, I've got roots all over Appalachia, and people spread out all over. But yes, I do identify as an Ohio Appalachian, and people sometimes forget that the tip of Ohio is indeed Appalachia.
I'll just say that I'm a kind of a transplant, but I moved to West Virginia in 1979 and had the good fortune to marry into a family of Proudfoots who came in 1790s to West Virginia. And I kind of was I'd say like trial by fire, learning very quickly how to like adjust to the new culture and also see if I belonged, you know, and it was an adventure. And a lot of that sort of factored into me writing this novel that I wrote. But in the late 1990s, I hopped across the Ohio River and moved to Athens. And I just love this region, and taught for many years at Hockin College, 20 years, where I taught a lot of first generation college students. And I felt like my ability to teach them was enhanced by the fact that I had lived in rural West Virginia for so long. I could sort of understand where they were coming from and encourage them to tell their stories. So that's my role here.
I wasn't sure where I was when I was growing up in Steubenville, Ohio, which is right across the river from Weirton, West Virginia. My best friend's dad was a Czechoslovakian Jew. He was married to an English war bride, and he collected ginseng and kept coonhounds over the hill. So I knew something about the region and its culture, but I didn't know that it was Appalachian. I thought it was just Steubenville. So it wasn't until I moved away and began to hang around with folks like Mike Henson, who during our college years, we were roommates during college. He began to go on mission work down in Martin County, Kentucky. And, you know, conversations and reading, slowly it became clear to me that I might be able to call myself an Appalachian. And on his suggestion, I went to the Appalachian Writers Workshop in Hindman, Kentucky, maybe in 1978 or 79. And there I learned that, yeah, I think you might be Appalachian. And so since then, it's been an education for me to grow in my sense of where I'm from and the wonderful mixture of cultures that was a part of growing up in a mill town in across the river from Weirton, West Virginia. It was as diverse as New York City.
I actually grew up in Western Ohio with Southern roots. And when I moved to Cincinnati, the only people that I could connect with were the people in the Appalachian community. And then I went to live for a while in Appalachian. So I have ancestral roots in Appalachia, but what really connected me was that feeling of being a country kid in the city. And the people I could relate to, that I could understand, and who understood me were the people in Over the Rhine and Lower Price Hill. So that's how I connect.
I think Sherry was going to pop in there too.
I'm here in Clermont County, Ohio, and I look out my back door. I see the river and see Kentucky. But I just wanted to add a little echo to what folks have said. I think that many of us have more than one home, because I do claim North Georgia and East Tennessee is my home too. And, you know, our folks, you know, have roots in Virginia and West Virginia, but the triangle of my home is this beautiful Ohio rolling river valley and the red dirt of North Georgia and those hard ridges of East Tennessee.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I wanted to toss out another question. We said in the description of the evening that it was going to be, that there would be a conversation about the strengths and challenges of Appalachian communities, urban and rural. One of the questions posed gets directly to that. The question was, the urban-rural divide that currently plagues our political system and the American national discourse, or lack thereof, how is that playing out in Appalachia, and where is the hope to overcome that going forward? So we have UACC core members here representing urban Appalachia. We have people from all over, as was just discussed. So urban-rural divide within Appalachia. Does anyone want to speak to that?
I will give it a stab. People know when they are looked down on. People know when they're being left out. People know when things have been taken from them. And it can be as simple as a politician refusing to visit Appalachian, Ohio, for example. You know, snobbery is real. A lot of people in the so-called flyover country are aware that elites, I hate to use almost the right wing term, coastal elites, you know, they do kind of don't know much about us and want to help us even, but they're often clumsy with their efforts. And so demagogues can so easily exploit that. So there's some alienation, which comes from not having things that we at least think we used to have, like knowing that our kid could come to Cincinnati and get a job. Maybe the jobs aren't there anymore. So sense of loss, sense of being looked down on, and being exploited by demagogues and taught lies, you know, that's all part of it. So it's a lack of sensitivity on the one hand, and being vulnerable to lies and propaganda on the other hand. Those are at least a couple of dimensions of the gap.
I'll just give this anecdote and you can figure it out for yourself. I had a photograph of myself and two of my buddies in front of about 10 tanned coon hides. And in the essay that it was an illustration for, I made it clear that this father of this Czechoslovakian Jew, ginseng hunter, coon hunter, was the collector of those hides, and he'd sell them. And I got a letter from somebody in Steubenville who said, I never saw a coon in my life.
Dick. When I was in graduate school in a seminar, I got asked, after I read a personal essay about my heritage, whether I grew up on dirt floors. And it didn't really hurt my feelings, but it just made me more aware of all the binary oppositions that fuel our culture. They're everywhere. You know, we see them now, of course, in the last 4 years especially. But I've just come to think that a lot of it is fed by our desire for confirmation bias. We so very much want to see what represents us mirrored in something, or we want to find the antithesis of who we think we are mirrored in something. And I think that drives the urban rural splitting of Appalachia, which I grew up saying Appalachia. And I think it also drives our perceptions of the belief systems that define people in urban and rural areas. And the truth is, I really did see one of my third cousins feed a baby Coke in a baby bottle. But I also know something about that third cousin as she fed her baby, was trying to comfort her as she was recovering from a terrible cancer, this child. And I think about things like that. And I think about how there's always a layer underneath of these stock types.
I think it's important for non-Appalachians to know that in the period like from 1900 to 1930, Appalachian coal miners in Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia were in the forefront of the American Labor Union and were in the forefront of pushing for social and economic justice. And that persisted through the New Deal. And, you know, the same people who are so identified with, you know, the other side now, you might say, helped that young Catholic from the Northeast get elected president, the people of West Virginia. And you still see pictures of Kennedys in cabins and shacks in the mountains.
Thanks, Mike. Greg has reminded us that we have about 10 minutes left and a whole bunch of questions. So I'm going to ask if he would like to read a few more for us to see if we can hit a few more before we end.
Another one that someone posed was, they said that they have lived in Cincinnati for 40 years. And when they first moved here, Appalachians always told them not to use the word hillbilly, that it was an epithet. And that's changed. And so they just asked for comment on that. And maybe if anyone wants to speak to a sense of ownership over the word.
I don't think it's changed. I just think somebody misappropriated it. And I believe it's, you know, it's all in who says it and how they say it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amen.
And that's what I responded, because she had a little coda behind her statement.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I know women who affectionately call each other bitch, but you better not call me one.
Oh, I would not.
They're not.
Okay, and then another question. Let's see. Could a couple of you all say what is your greatest hope for the future of Appalachia as a region?
Clean energy,
take a
clean
stab at
water,
that.
and clean air.
Amen.
I want to see education for all. I think once every person is allowed to have an education, we will see such changes in any gaps that are happening within this country. But without education, without appropriate health care, without appropriate care for mental illness and addiction, we are all going to be kept right where we are. And sometimes I feel like a conspiratist, but I wonder if that's not what's happening. So I think we all have to fight harder for the things that I just said, and I'll say them again: education, healthcare, attention to mental illness. And I know we're really starting to pay attention to addiction now, but we need to stay on top of that and continue to do that.
Love you, Carrie.
I'd like to add a tiny bit to what Carrie was saying. In my years teaching at Hawken College, we had students who cared so much to go to college that they lived in their cars while they were attending Hawken College. I had students who couldn't afford to pay a parking ticket if they parked in the wrong lot and were afraid to come back to class. And, you know, if education cost a lot less or was free, or there was some kind of way to finesse that, I think we'd see a lot more people flooding into the schools. So there are ways to address some of these issues.
And I guess I'll just add to that, and particularly in terms of education, the truism that my friend Mope Carter de Poico likes to say pretty often is, if you don't know where you've been, how can you know where you're going? And I think it's why I alluded to a bit in the bit of the essay that I read, that there is that, who and what Appalachia is now doesn't just come out of the current political climate or the current circumstances or the current, economic depression or changes in, in energy use. That there's a long history of colonialism and resistance to colonialism and resilience and and unity within Appalachia. And if our young people and our old people like me don't have that history to build upon, then it's really hard to know where to go. And so part of that education has to be a sort of social and political education.
And without that social and historical and political education, how can you contextualize a memoir of a culture if you don't have the full depth of the history and the politics and all of the aspects of it? So this is one of the big challenges about writing about Appalachia is, how rich is your base? And how rich is your experience and your knowledge about the region? That's a question that all of us as Appalachian writers, I think we confront all the time.
Well, just to add to that, I grew up going down south to some of those old time homecomings, and I would wish for an Appalachia where everyone could sit at the table, but to sit at the table, you have to bring a dish and you have to be part of that community sincerely. So my hope is going forward that there would be less splitting, that everyone could sit at the table. Everyone.
Some folks who have joined us this evening may not have seen the part at the beginning where Pauletta, addressed the title for the evening and how we weren't actually coming together to discuss hillbilly elegy, but instead we're using that as sort of the occasion to bring in many other voices. I just wanted to reiterate that because we have a lot of questions coming about J.D. Vance and the book and movie. I don't know if Pauletta, you want to reiterate what you had started with?
Well, I'll just say that the title, say directly, don't cry for us to J.D. Vance, because we ain't dead, so we're alive and kicking and kicking butt every now and then as well. And so the idea of an elegy seems inappropriate to this particular group of writers. And the occasion of Hillbilly Elegy, on the other hand, has certainly created an interest in Appalachia among folks who might not have otherwise been interested. And so we are taking that opportunity for such education. I think too that, that Dick, sort of obliquely, but I heard it fairly directly, addressed the issue of what we see as being missing within this particular memoir, and that is any depth of knowledge about how an individual family situation is in fact connected with this larger economic and socio-political society and history around them. I mean, much of what happened in Middletown happened because first there were unions and then there weren't. A lot of what happened in Appalachia happened because there were no unions and then there were, and then there weren't. So there's, just to use unions as an example, as a low-hanging fruit example. But we would like to broaden that conversation, and we believe that we are part of a a whole cadre of activist writers who are trying to educate ourselves as well as the larger community about where we fit within that history.
Yeah, so there's another book that we haven't mentioned tonight is Elizabeth Katz's What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia, which is a terrific short book. And she says in the beginning of that book that she had moved to, I think it was Texas, and she would tell people where she was from, and everyone would think that they understood the region that she was from, and that it was characterized by certain problems. And she looked around and saw those same problems there. And so there's just sort of been a way that the story that's told in hillbilly elegy then becomes the story around hillbilly elegy, right? In the way that one book is used to describe a region, and one family's story is never going to be able to explain a region. It's a complicated country.
That's one of the things we find so irksome about that book, is that there is so much out there that has that broader context, that has that depth of history and cultural awareness that this book lacks. And yet it's the one that goes to the top of the bestseller list. It's the one that everybody references. It's very painful to hear that. I find it personally to be insulting that book has gotten the attention that Kat's book didn't get, or Dorothy Allison's book didn't get, or the people around this screen have not gotten. So.
And yet I don't want to leave on the note of J.D. Vance and Hillbilly Elegy. So Greg, could you find us maybe one more question to respond to that might keep us broad? Sure.
Yeah. Well, there are people throwing in recommendations for other books here. So maybe I don't know if that's something that we ought to do as well, is if anyone wants to throw out names of books that haven't been mentioned tonight or that have, but just if you want someone to be able to read more about Appalachia, maybe each person could just quickly say one book that they wish everyone would pick up.
Sounds great. Why don't we, we'll do what I do in my classes, and we'll go around the screen. I'll call on, say who's up and then who's next. So Bonnie, you're up first, and Mike, you're after, Mike Henson, you're after Bonnie.
I'd like to recommend Cassie Chambers' book, Hill Country Woman. She's from Kentucky, and she went to Yale and became a lawyer, and it's a memoir. And she returned to Kentucky and couldn't really bear to leave the people that she was raised with, but she came with her Yale education, and the book is very honest and heartfelt, and profiles her family members, and it's a kind of good female perspective on the same subject matter as Vance's.
Great, thank you, Bonnie. So I said Mike Henson's up next, and Carrie, you're after Mike Henson.
Harriet Arno, The Doll Maker.
Yeah. Go back to the classic. Yep. Carrie, and then Dick Haig.
And Michael, that is probably one of my very favorite books of all time. And I think everybody should read that book. Absolutely. I just wanted to suggest, so that people don't have to buy a book in case they are a little short of funding right now with the pandemic. And I just want to suggest that they go online and read Still the Journal. It has some of the finest Appalachian writing that you will find, and it's free. And of course, they wouldn't mind if you made a contribution to them, but the folks over there, Marianne Worthington and Silas House and Karen McElmurray, are doing an amazing job of publishing some of the finest Appalachian work available today. So I'd like to choose.
Let me just butt in real quick to say that we'll make a list of everyone's suggestions, and we'll post them on the UACC site with the recording, and we'll put it on the Downbound site so that you all don't have to scribble it down.
Great, thanks, Greg. Dick, and then Amope.
Okay, I'll wait patiently.
Thank you.
I would say if you're going to read one book about Appalachia that will teach you a lot about the culture, the people, and the language, it would be James Still's River of Earth.
Thank you. Amope, then Sherry.
Journey Onward.
Who's the author?
It's the gripping story of a preacher as he matures from boyhood to elder statesman, who through grit and determination decided to follow the voice of God. Despite hardships and setbacks, Douglas continued on the path to fulfill God's plan for his life. Learn from his autobiographical narrative, which is full of humor and nostalgia, as he recalls his past experiences and current challenges. My sister, Tracy, and my father communicated by tapes, and she then transcribed his story. And so if you want to read a nice memoir that represents a slice of Appalachia, this would be a good one.
Thank you. Sherry, then Mike Maloney.
I ache to choose, but something tells me I must say Jean Ritchie's Singing Family of the Cumberlands.
Thank you.
Nice.
I will recommend a very short book, but says a lot about the contemporary situation in Appalachia through the eyes of adolescents. And it's called Same Sun. And it's a pen pal set of letters between an Appalachian boy in Eastern Kentucky and a girl in New York City with roots in India. And, you know, it's a multicultural view, and it's just really well done.
Thanks, Mike. Del Marie, need to unmute. There you go.
I thought I would plug another opportunity for Many Voices. This is Quarried. It was edited by Dick Haig and Pauletta and Sherry, I believe, as well. And this is from the Southern Appalachian Writers Co-op.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you. And I'll just end, you know, there are so many, but sort of thinking about something that is very entertaining and yet is hard hitting is Robert Gipe's Trampoline, which is a novel, and it's the first of several novels. And so folks who you know, are looking for a story can't go wrong with Robert Gipe's work, in addition to the storytellers that are here today.
Yes.
I'll add that plug as well. So Greg?
Okay, well, thank you to Pauletta again, and to all of our readers this evening, and to Jeff and UACC, and then again to West Virginia University Press. It's been great to be together this evening, hear all these great perspectives, great poems, stories. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Greg, and thanks to all of you for coming. Just want to make sure too with our audience members that you know the Urban Appalachian Community Coalition site. You can contact us there. There's a contact at uacvoice.org, and we'd be happy to bring you into the conversation as we move forward. So have a great night, and thanks for being with us. And panelists, if you would like to stay on a minute, that would be fine.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
And panelists, if you need to log off, that's fine. I just wanted to offer the opportunity in case you would like to chat.
Are we still recording, Pauletta? Should we stop that?
Thank you for